on 5G and the connected robots. Mr. Lim, please.
Yeah, good morning everyone. My name is Jim Lim and I come from Huawei. I work in the Group Chief Transformation Office, right? So I think when the organizer first invited me to speak at this SIRE forum, I was thinking why Huawei, right? Because we don't make robots, at least not as of now, right? So what is our connection really to the robotics industry? Right, I'll share with you a couple of slides of how Huawei played the robotics scene, mainly from two perspectives. One is connectivities related, which I think it gels very well with Prof. Wang was mentioning just now, right? Because whether it's robots or is it drones, you can't have them working or moving around without connectivities, right? And connectivities come in different form, right? In the cellular wireless technologies, as well as the basic one like Wi-Fi, GPS, and even Bluetooth, right, for some of that. And the other one is being in the commercial organization, we focus more on application, right? More than, let's say, research and the market industry part. Okay. The robot is not working. Sorry, I need technical help here. Okay, now it works. Okay, so maybe a connection issue. Okay, so I think many people know Huawei as a mobile phone company. We launched Mate 20 about a couple of weeks ago. So probably, and it's one of the most talked about phone, right? With all the wireless charging, as well as the latest 3 cameras. So I believe most of the audience here knows Huawei as a device manufacturer, but we're actually more than that, right? I would like to give you a quick glance of what Huawei is. We have 180,000 employees around the world, and we serve 170 countries, right? And we have about 14 R&D institutions. You will see what kind of investment we put in for R&D purposes. And then we are actually, mainly due to the device business, we became the number 83 in terms of global 500 companies and top brands of number 70. Okay, so how is Huawei related to the robotics industry, right? There are two parts. Apart from the device, the consumer business that we are in, right? There are two parts that we are kind of linked to the robotics industry. First is, of course, our bread and butter of the carrier business, where we actually started 30 over years ago selling networking equipment, and of course now selling 4G, 3G, and subsequently 5G to the telecom companies. And you'll see from my slides later, the telecom companies are moving towards cloud, and the cloudification, which again I think Lin Jia mentioned, the cloud robotics is another norm that's coming up, and that's going to be having telco operators to play a part in that. The other one is the enterprise business. So Huawei has an enterprise business group, which actually we drive digital transformation for different vertical industries. That includes smart manufacturing, right? And also smart healthcare, which has been the most talked about two industries, sectors for the robotics industries. Okay, this is our investment in R&D. Every year we actually spend more than 10% of our annual revenue in R&D, and there are various kinds of R&D that we actually spend in. There's the basic research and fundamental engineering, which we work with institutions and academics to actually talk about things like 5G, AI algorithms, and then even material sciences, right? And then we also have joint innovations with our partners as well as customers, and this includes from a robotics perspective, people like KUKA, people like Bosch, people like ABB, right? And then last but not least, we have talent development program. We have just launched early October in China what we call the AI Developers Engagement Program, and that program actually wants to fast track the entire AI learning and applications in China. And hopefully this and AI definitely has a part to play in the robotics scene. Right? Okay, hi Pepper. So I guess many people know Peppers when it was launched a couple of years ago. It is one of the most talked about, and it actually brings the robotics industry or robotics scene closer to the consumer people like you and me, right? Before that, we are not, we know robots exist, but we are not really so much into robotics and how the application of it. So Pepper has been launched when I first met him or her many years ago. It was mainly a greetings robot, right? It is used for greeting purposes. When you go near it, it can kind of sense your emotion, ask you some question, you can show your happiness or your sadness, and then you can react accordingly. So that was what Pepper was actually built or used many years ago when it was launched. And subsequently, I met Pepper more often, in especially exhibitions like the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Pepper is used for guidance purposes, right? It is used with some program and learning capabilities. It is able to bring you to the place or the forums or summits that you want to go to. So it has always been, this service robot, right, personal service robot, has always been used for greetings and guidance purposes, right? Okay, like what I think Sujiyama-san mentioned just now, industrial robots. I think this is where robotics actually took place many years ago, right? I think more than 30 years ago. And we all know, before Pepper exists, we all know robots more used in the industrial or manufacturing scene, right? Industrial robots. So all the industrial robotics automations has been a norm in the manufacturing scene, right? And of course, many of this, even I think up to today, many of the manufacturing industries are still using wired connections for robotics or for manufacturing purposes, right? And the last one, the photo you see, Huawei and KUKA, we launched this I think about 2 years ago in one of our Huawei Connect forum. That is one of the wireless connection robots that we have actually put in. From a non-industrial robots perspective, right, I believe many of you here are robotics experts. We actually classify them as services robots. And services robots, you can further subcategorize them into what we call the professional services robots, as well as the personal home services robots. Right, for the professional services robots, we're talking about things that are used for logistic purposes, and what Prof. Wang mentioned just now, from a drones perspective, right, whether the Western world like Amazon or the Eastern world like China, Jingdong, they have been using drones for delivery purposes. Actually, even in Huawei ourselves, in our Shenzhen campus, you can see drones flying around delivering KFC, because that's what we actually use within our campus, right? In Huawei, everything that we launch to the market, before we actually launch the market, we use it internally first, be it the drones, be it the AI, facial recognition, and so on and so forth, right? So, I mean, in the Chinese saying is, 你先吃自己的狗粮, that means you eat your own dog food first before you sell it to the customer. So that has always been our motto, right? Another professional service robots that we see commonly in use in recent years is actually for security and surveillance purposes, right? One of the robots there that you see, actually, if you go to Shenzhen Airport often, you may see it running around. It's playing some kind of a policing kind of role in the airport itself. So these two are quite commonly used, I would say, for the past 3 to 5 years in terms of the professional service robots. Okay, now we move on to the personal home service robots, right? This, I would say that some of it is already in place, but most of it are still on a trial and conceptual basis, right? This includes personal care and assistance. I think Linja mentioned just now. Healthcare industry is one of the industry that's going to use a lot of robotics applications, which we believe in as well, right? And it's not just about remote surgery or robotic surgery. We're looking at, with aging population, the personal care and assistance, the need of using robots for these industries is actually even more demanding, right? And then the next one would be education, entertainment, and companion purposes, right? You see the two robots there. One is from ASUS, for example. The other one is SoftBank again for now. Right? So these are the robots that are supposed to help your kids to learn together from an education perspective. Also, maybe to stay with your aging parents for, apart from healthcare, also for companionship purposes. And we can see that moving from the left to right, there is an increasing humanoid appearance, right, for robots. So that is really to make robots closer to your life when you want to move from industrial to professional services to personal home service. You wouldn't want industrial-looking robots to be with you for companionship or for care and assistance, right? So that's from a purely appearance perspective. And then from a data perspective, intelligence perspective, we see that this, apart from humanoid appearance, they actually have more intelligence being built in, right? And this includes things like NLP, image analysis, AI, machine learning, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the trend that we're looking at, and that's also growing. Okay, so what we have seen so far from whether the industrial robot or the services robots, it has always been more a silo robots kind of functioning, right? So how do we actually enable more connected and collaborative robots, right? Collaborative robots was what Lianjia mentioned, cobots, right? More about connected robots. In a factory or manufacturing perspective, if you want to move into smart manufacturing, you can't be really at looking robots working in silo or robots doing repetitive tasks only, right? Although today we are seeing that there are robots already working together, but to some extent they are working in a controlled manner. So how do you actually enable, let's say you have a leaders robot who have expensive sensors on them, and the rest are what we call workers robot working together with this leader robot. So how do you enable more connected robots in that sense? The other one from a services or non-industrial robot perspective is actually, we have already seen it in Google AlphaGo, right, who won the Weiqi contest against human, right? In this Google DeepMind, right, actually a lot of, you'll be surprised of how much threads and GPUs that it has to process. It actually processes 46 threads, 1,000 over CPUs and 100 over GPUs, right? I don't know what these numbers meant to you. They are really big numbers, right? If you are very familiar with the entire data centers, infrastructure, and AI kind of scenes, right? These are really big numbers from that perspective. So a normal silo robots cannot process so much things if you have the controller in the robot itself, right? So what really makes all these things collaborative robots or connected robots, or in this case Google AlphaGo possible? It is what we call the cloud robots, right? So this is again what I think Lianjia briefly mentioned in his speech just now, right? We are looking at cloud robotics, which will become a norm in coming years, right? And what cloud robotics is, right? Put in layman terms, is very simple. Instead of the controller in your local brain in the robots itself, right? You actually have the brain in the cloud, right? So apart from the public cloud providers like Google, Amazon, who are trying to go into the robotics industry, we are saying that cloud robotics will be a norm. It doesn't always necessarily mean that everything has to go to a public cloud. You can get private cloud as well, right? But cloud robotics will be a norm because you can really leverage the power of cloud, right? To have your intelligence in the cloud, which is to have a brain in the cloud, right? This includes things like information sharing, right? I think just now we see the case of drones. You need to process a lot of data. That includes environment data, when you put the drones in the digital skies, how they coordinate with each other, or you put a fleet of robots in the forest that we see just now in the example, how they coordinate with each other, how they analyze the environment data, because you can get environment data from GPS, but they are not static. So how do you process all this dynamic data that is keep on changing, right? And of course, just like any cloud devices, when you put the robotics brain into the cloud, you can have up-to-date applications, and you can back up the data as well. So that's another advantage of cloud robotics from an information sharing perspective. The other one is offload computation, right? You want your robots to have higher intelligence, you want the robot to be able to process more things, right? You need to have the computation to be done somewhere else. If not, well, you can do it in silo in the single robot itself, but it's going to cost you a bomb, right? It's going to be expensive. So one thing to leverage is the shared infrastructure, which is cloud in this sense. You can offload all the computation onto the cloud, right? This includes all the data-intensive tasks, which like voice, image recognition, NLP itself, the motion planning, and environmental mapping, etc., right? The last but not least is collaboration. So cloud robotics actually enable collaboration, right? Again, this is what I mentioned in the industrial robotic scenes in the manufacturing environment. You can actually have all the sensors which are more expensive on the leaders robot, right? It can also work with the cloud from that perspective. And the other workers robots will just coordinate with the leader robots in a coordinated manner, right? Okay, on the right hand side, we see a research market insights from GTI Cloud Robotics Working Group, right? They have predicted that by 2020, connected robots will account for more than 90% of all the robots that are going to ship around the world, right? And there will be about 20 million more new connections. Okay. So this is quite a crowded slide before we go to really what the 5G connectivity is. So when we see that cloud robotics is going to be a norm as compared to all your silo robotics, both in the industrial and the services scene, we see that what are the requirements of cloud robotics, right? There are four functions that cloud robotics actually needs, right? Which are in the table below: monitoring and status reporting, right? Real-time control, video and voice processing, and software and services download, right? To achieve all these four functions, you actually need, I think, some common things, right? One is definitely the latency. It has to be low enough that you can actually do all this real-time control as well as important mission-critical processing. The other one is definitely the high connection density, because you're going to have more connected robots or more connected drones. You need the connection density. And lastly will be the uplink and the bandwidth that you need, really high quality and reliability of the uplink and bandwidth, right? So we actually see that cloud robotics is actually your normal robot physics, which everyone is familiar with, plus two important things. One is connectivity, which I think there wasn't much mentioning about it, although I hear quite a lot of requirements of it just now, right? But it doesn't seem, it seems to me that the robotics industry and the connectivity and communication industry kind of not really working very closely together yet, right, to some extent. And the other one is about AI, right? AI is an algorithm and learning, but as we mentioned just now in the cloud robotics perspective, the AI, the brain, right, and the learning capabilities is going to be the cloud. Cloud is another form of connectivity as well, right? So if we want to really have a strong and cloud robotics, I think we need to have good connectivity. And I'm not saying that 5G is the only answer to it, but I have to say that 5G is one of the very important answers to many of the restrictions that you may have today from a robotics advancement perspective, right? So there may not be many communication engineers here or people from the telco industries, but this is going to be a very commonly used slides when you want to know about 5G, right? And this has been, I was in a few forums for the past 1 month, including APEC MedTech, B2B, and some about AI. This has been very important to know that the 5G plays a part in almost many vertical industries that we actually talk about, right? So this is from ITU, they call it IMT 2020 vision, right? And under 5G, there are 3 key capabilities that is going to deliver. One is what we call the Enhanced Mobile Broadband, EMBB. I will go through the applications of this in the next couple of slides, right? So EMBB is one of that. That really talks about a lot of data transfers, right? And then the other one is MMTC, Massive Machine Type Communication. Many people know this as IoT, but it's actually much more than that, right? And the other one is URLLC, which is your ultra reliable, low latency communication. Okay. And all this 5G capabilities that's going to be introduced is going to kind of create or reshape industries, right, including manufacturing and many others, right, because they actually have new technologies being enabled like the AR, VR, and they also have industry being changed, like how driving is going to be like, how smart cities and smart nation is going to be like, right. A little bit of selling here from a Huawei perspective, we are actually the only one company which provide the most complete end-to-end 5G systems, right, from the core network and the RAM to the CPE, as well as the chipset itself, right? And for those who are interested, we can discuss more offline. From a 5G perspective, there are many different spectrum that's going to be either reused, refarmed, or going to be introduced as new ones. And we actually cover all the spectrum needs according to the territory needs, as well as the application needs. Okay. And from a capabilities perspective, although 5G is still under trial, there's still one last release from 3GPP to be standardized. But we believe that Japan, Korea, and probably China will be the first one to commercialize 5G, probably next year, right? And from a trial perspective, Huawei has actually achieved and even surpassed all the 5G's requirements from a throughput, latency, and connections perspective, right? And you'll see later on, latency is a very important characteristic and criteria of fulfilling 5G. Okay, so a little bit more about the 3 functionalities of 5G. The first one is EMBB, right? As we say just now, 5G, maybe to layman, it is just a bigger pipe with more and faster connections and data transfer. But actually, it's more than that, right? This talks a lot about data transfer, right? Because you need to have cloud robotics in the brain, the brain in the cloud, as well as all the data analytics to be processed. And then you have AR, VR, which can be used either in the healthcare scene as well as the manufacturing scene, right? And then I'm not saying that, as I mentioned, 5G is the only answer to enable cloud robotics or better connectivity, right? That's why we actually put down what are the current situation. All these things, you can see them under trials when 5G is not really commercially released yet, because you can use it using 4G or other technology or other connections. But there are always challenges of using them, right? Like in this case, you can actually offload some of this traffic to wire connections, which are usually the case in the manufacturing plant today. But these wire connections either are very expensive or proprietary, right? And this can be a challenge if you want to go it big and have more connected devices, right? And of course, connection is also possible, as I mentioned, but they are not really performing up to what they can do if you really have a 5G standards, right? So requirements and why 5G really is important and helps here. They actually enable higher data transfer and higher security and reliability. Again, we can talk about offline or the entire 5G security infrastructure. How is it going to differ from 4G? How additional reliability and security is going to provide, right? So in this EMBB perspective, it actually helps to enable a lot of the smart manufacturing, the AI-enabled personalized care services, and then of course all the like oil rigs as well as disaster sprays that it can actually help to apply 5G in. Okay. The next one is MMTC perspective, right? I think, as I mentioned, many of you are linking this to IoT. Yes, it's definitely part of the IoT thing, but there's also another thing apart from the industrial IoT, right? There's a more common term they are surfacing right now. It's called IoRT, right? Internet of Robotic Things, right? You can search about that. But basically, when we talk about IoT perspective, whether from an IoT perspective or a general IoT perspective, you're looking at a lot of connected devices. And then you have cloud and to process all the AI. But again, all these are kind of devices connections. There isn't really a robotics interference or robotics involvement in the entire IoT. So IoRT is really trying to see that, okay, how do you actually merge and coordinate robotics with the entire connected devices, right? Can robots actually act like a human brain to control and reprogram and recontrol some of these devices itself? So that's the concept of IoRT. So again, IoT is not new. There are so many connected devices today, right? Whether on the 4G standards or more commonly used would be all your LoRa, Zigbee, as well as the NB-LT, which is for larger coverage. So that is not something new, but of course there's a limitation of how it can cover more connected devices. When you talk about billions of connected devices, actually 5G can actually provide a better cost per bit in terms of supporting more devices, right? So that is what 5G enabled as well. And once you want to have more than just a sensor and collection of the data on your devices, you want to process and analyze it, that's where 5G provides the connectivity requirement to process all the analytics itself. Right? Again, it's like EMBB just now. It can help to enable smart manufacturing in a better way, as well as AI personalized healthcare. And the other one that we see is connected drones. So just now we saw the case of the drones. They cannot work in I think multi-robotic scene, right? How they actually go together. So actually 5G can help rather than your normal GPS or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth kind of connections, right? Thirdly, I think this is really how 5G can change, hopefully, the scene of healthcare and manufacturing, right? URLC, it provides the reliability and the latency that's needed when you want to do mission-critical applications, right? 5G requires you to have sub-millisecond kind of performance, and you see that we have already achieved that with 0.33 millisecond, right? And when you want to do either AR, VR kind of remote surgery or robotic surgery, right? These are the ones that you actually need 5G, because today in 4G you need 20 to 40 seconds to achieve that, right? Which is good, but not good enough to really do mission-critical kind of applications. You wouldn't want the robots to operate on you, and you cannot react fast enough, right, with a sub-millisecond response when anything goes wrong or things change. So this is the case where with the aging population, the increasing healthcare costs, as well as Industry 4.0 and the Make China 2025 vision, URLC, which is a key functionality of 5G, is going to help to progress this industries much faster. Okay, so hopefully up to now, I've given you a brief appreciation of what 5G can bring with three functionality or capabilities to the robotics and subsequent industries, right? So if we try to put everything which we want to show smart manufacturing, right? Because in Singapore, I understand the GDP is still about 20% made up of manufacturing industry, and then if you include the related services, it's probably close to 30%. Right, so if Singapore again want to get ourselves into the smart manufacturing scene fast enough, right, instead of wired kind of connections in the manufacturing plant, it's probably time to look at wireless robots development, right, which is quite commonly used in China today. Right? And the entire purpose of 5G and wireless connection, just for start, actually can help to reduce the cable costs, right? To provide a ubiquitous wireless connection, right? And then the sensor data acquisition, right, can be done more cost effectively with wireless and of course 5G connections, right? And the other thing is more important one would be the predictive maintenance, right? And the whole thing about robotics is that you don't need to send humans to do the maintenance and operations work. You can do it through robots, and all these things you wouldn't want to send the robots whenever something goes wrong only. You want to have predictive maintenance, and that's where the wireless connections with all the AI, cloud, as well as the sensor collections and analysis can actually help in the entire wireless robots development. Right? Okay, last but not least, as we see and as I mentioned before, and you can see the three functions, characteristics of 5G, it is not just really to provide you a bigger pipe or faster and more data transfer. It's actually, we believe that it's a platform for transformation, especially vertical industry transformation, whether manufacturing, healthcare, or others that may or may not use robotics, right? And then from a Huawei perspective, we don't manufacture robots still, at least not as of now. We work very closely with industry partners like KUKA, Bosch, ABB, and all this you can see that we have achieved sub-millisecond count latency or high speed or massive data, device connections with all these industry players in the robotics scene, right? Okay, and the last one is actually we have this use case in, we have a lab called X Labs in Shanghai, which are dedicated just for 5G research. And one of the research theme of this X Lab is actually talking about robotics related from a smart manufacturing and drones perspective. So we welcome any industrial partner who wants to get into our ecosystem to use 5G to develop for the robotics or relevant vertical industries, as well as to put your devices or solutions in our X Labs to really test out how we can bring robotics into the next advanced stage. Okay, with that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lim. Please remain on stage and take a seat. We will now proceed into the panel discussion for the session. I would now like to invite our panel of distinguished speakers on stage to take their seats. Professor Wang Danwei, President from IEEE Robotics and Automation Society Singapore Chapter, Mr. Su Lianjie, Principal Analyst from AB Research, and Mr. Jin Lim, Global Director from Huawei International. Last but not least, it gives me great pleasure to invite moderator of this session, Professor Feng Shaohui, Assistant Professor from Singapore University of Technology and Design. Please give the panel a warm welcome of applause, and I will now hand over the session to the moderator. Professor Feng, please.
Hello, everybody. So I know I'm the only person bringing you in your lunch, but I'll try to make it quick. So I think we have a very interesting talk from three different people and three different aspects of robotics. So Prof. Wang definitely represents academia. Mr. Su presents a very neutral viewpoint of what robotics is, and Mr. Lin from the industry point of view. Right, so maybe before I open up to the public, I will just start off with a few questions. Right? Maybe I will start off with Prof. Wang, which I know quite well. He has been doing research since 1994, which is a very, very long time. So with that experience, I wanted to ask him, since he is doing so much research in Singapore, is there something about Singapore that makes robotics special? Like the research that you do, is it different from other places in the world? Something unique that you think, maybe it's the humidity, the temperature, the sunlight, maybe it's different? Share with us.
actually Singapore has academics at least has been doing a lot of work in robotics research. If you look at the major conferences, publications, Singapore actually published a lot of paper in terms of absolute number as well as percentage in terms of the population. So Singapore is doing very well in robotics research. And of course, this will be, there are multiple factors leading to this. Government support and industry are very supportive. And so also the researchers, and they are very much into this one. And so they can see that there are a lot of issues here, and so they get excited. And this is a very unique, probably in Asia, besides Japan and Korea, Singapore is one of the major research hub for robotics.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll go to Mr. Su. I have a very interesting comment about the last part where you mentioned robots as a service. So I think when we all buy a computer, we buy it outright. We never consider that we lease a computer. So I think many people think a computer is like a robot. If you ask them to think of leasing it, it's quite different. So maybe I thought Mr. Su can tell us more about this mindset.
Yeah, and I do agree that because robots has already been viewed as a hardware or piece of hardware, there has been sort of this culture of seeing robots as an outright purchase. But I think what the industry needs to sort of understand is that having this as a service model actually helps with robotics adoption. Because the way you think about it is that you, instead of putting that very high capex or upfront cost, now you sort of move into an OPEX model, whereby you perhaps pay a monthly fee, like an installment fee, and then on top of that, maybe offer services, value-added services, maintenance, analytics, even maybe connectivity on that front. You can add in a SIM card for your 5G SIM card forward, and that will enrich the entire experience. Now, there is a challenge as well, I think, in the industry whereby there is a lot of talk about buying a robotic system and then it becomes, I guess, obsolete a few years down the road. With RAS, what the vendor can do is that perhaps they can do TA updates or they can do future upgrades that is baked into the contract itself. So that as time goes along, the robots become better adapt to the future and become more future-proof as well. So that's where we sort of see the benefits for us.
Thank you. So for Mr. Lin, I think 5G is definitely the future. And I think without communications, we will not be able to do multi-robot coordination, cloud robotics. I think all the data transfer, speed is very important. I thought there's something very important when you transmit data over the air, which is security. Right? I was thinking maybe you can tell us about this. I mean, it's quite an important thing. If you transfer more data over the open areas, people can read it. And this is maybe could be an issue in the future. What are your thoughts on this?
So before I answer that, this is quite a common question. But before I answer that, actually just to add on what Nick mentioned, like the cloud robotics and the robotics as a service. So today, of course, we can buy Pepper for about $1,600, right? And you can actually rent Pepper for about, I think, US dollar 300 per month. And actually, we are working very closely with telcos in China, who actually is providing this kind of robot as a service, right? Selling robotics using cloud or other telco services in the packagement and payment. So I think that's definitely practical. And it actually links to cloud robotics as well. Right? Because to be able to do these things, because as a service, you need to be able to have constant updates. To have constant updates, you don't want to go to the thousands of robots in the factory floor or services and try to update from there, right? To update from clouds, and that's where cloud robotics is about. So coming back to the question about security, right? So a little bit technical on the 5G network, so we can again discuss offline, but 5G networks, how it differs for, let's say, 4G networks, there are two very important things, right? One is what we call the network slicing. So network slicing itself, the concept is that in the 5G network perspective, you have different slices for different vertical applications or industries. You can one slice just for IoT, one slice just for robotics, one slice just for, let's say, basic data transfer. So that's how the network slicing is going to be developed in 5G infrastructure. And that network slicing will have better enhanced security because you can put different types of security needs, because you don't put one common one and increase the cost for everyone as you like 5G, right? So you can put different specific security needs, right, into different slices. Let's say robotics, it may need more, and healthcare it may need more as compared to a normal SIM card kind of application. Then you can put additional, including advanced technologies like blockchain and the rest of the different slices. Right? Another thing about cloud technology again, right, that needs 5G is about the data technology, as well as now 4G will already started, but 5G will have more is the SDN, the software defined network, and the network function visualization. And when it was just a pure hardware or infrastructure based kind of network, right, the security standards is to some extent pre-programmed or limited. When it comes to software, just like any different software, you can actually add different layers of security on it, including things like identity management, including things like different level of authentication. And the 5G, that's one key difference in the entire identity management is that in the past, like 4G, it's just between the operators and the network provider, right? But then in the 5G, you actually add the vertical industry as one component and then trusting network. So all these are the different additional security features when it comes to 5G.
Alright, thank you. So I think I'll open up the floor. If anybody got any questions from any of the panelists here. Anybody? Any interesting? Yes.
Thank you. My question is there any possibility that one of the days ahead, a robot will have a human feeling sense to be able to relate match with them in the workplace, especially sympathy for the human?
So I guess to rephrase the question, you're asking about whether robots require, I guess, empathy or the ability to express expression like a human. Yeah. So I think I'm not going to. I think Prof. Wang might have more to say on the technological front, but I think this is, I guess, more of an AI question in a way, because I think at the current stage, if you look at the AI development, there are algorithms, or there are sort of what we call AI models where they can detect human emotions. If you're angry, they know that you're angry. If you're sad, they know that you're sad. Either by facial expression, because when you make certain gestures, your face will frown or your face will smile, that gives off certain combinations, and then that tells that you're happy. Or it goes by semantics or your tone of words. So when you form the sentences, you may say the sentence will carry certain emotions. If you're happy, you'll be using more positive words. If you're not happy, you'll use negative words, and that forms certain correlations, and then that gives off, I guess, an understanding of emotions. And I do sort of believe that with robotics, Pepper right now, they are sort of able to give very basic sort of communication capabilities. But I think if you bake in certain layers of AI communication into them, so I think one of the examples would be Google Duplex. Google has just recently launched, or rather showcased an example where they can make machine calls to human and then sound like human. And if you make that into a Pepper, then there is a possibility where there's a future where the robots can understand human emotions and can sort of relate to human, even though in a very mathematical way, I guess.
Prof. do you have anything to add?
I think Mr. Su has answered in the correct direction. And indeed, it's an AI issue, and then with the technology advancement, then this is possible, but it will take a long time. And we are in the very infancy stage. And because the human emotion is a very complex, a very subtle manner, and the technology is able to differentiate some major differences now, but you want to make a really subtle differentiation. It's quite a challenge. And in particular, in Asian, and sometimes they don't say it in a direct way. And that, so we have to guess in a sense. So it's a challenge in a sense. It's a culture dependent as well.
So maybe I just add on a little bit. Definitely it's an AI thing, right? But again, back to your question is, can it be like human, right? So we go back to what human has. We have 5 senses, right? So I think today robots can really do at least 4 of them very well, right? The listening, right? The seeing, smelling, and the tasting. I think robots can do this quite well. Tasting a little bit here and there. But the last one that I can't do very well is the feeling. And this goes back to the neural network theory. I mean, how much do we really understand the human brain, right? I think before we really understand the human brain good enough, right, the robots will be at the slowest pace in terms of the development, right? But of course, whatever is in the AI, in the cloud itself, the brain in the cloud, everything is possible, right? It has the self and the deep learning as well. And I believe if we really do faster and deep learning kind of things, it may, I don't know, it may surpass and move faster than the human brain understanding. It may.
Thank you. Any other questions for panelists? Anybody want to raise one more question? Anybody? If not, I think I'm going to hold you back for lunch. Right? I'd like to thank the 3 panelists. They spent a very good talk just now. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Paul and speakers, for an engaging discussion. May I please invite you to stay on stage for a group photo taking session?